our work right now on the planet is to bring honoring and sanctity to the invisible just as much as the visible. The invisible results are things like feeling good, things like feeling connected, things like our health, our well-being, a feeling of joy, pleasure.
Embodiment can't be faked. Once you're in an open state where you actually can see through a clear lens, you know, you're not clouded by fear, you're not clouded by the amygdala, you're not clouded by society's news and all the fear-based stuff, and you're just with you. Then you get to decide where you think we actually are.
It is possible to navigate pain with grace.
Energy is information. We're here to experience the full spectrum.
That worthiness is hard for you. There's nothing wrong with you. It is a muscle that we kind of have to learn how to access. You are not disempowered, and you have power in every area of your life all the time.
I believe that chronic illness is an opportunity for us to heal.
Health, it's a choice. Listening to your body if you so choose.
My prayer for the world would be that they would know the infinite love of God.
Aloha and welcome to the Body and Soul Wisdom Podcast, formerly known as the Embodied Healing Self Podcast, with your host, jenmons. Join me each week for soul-inspired, conscious conversations around awakening to your soul purpose through 5-element well-being. Thank you so much for joining in. Hello and welcome back to this week's episode of the Body and Soul Wisdom Podcast. So, just to review, if you've been with us over the past couple weeks of this 10-week prosperity experience, week 1, we created your prosperity roadmap. Week 2, we identified your money blocks through the 7 money saboteurs. And in week 3, we created your empowering money story. Week 4, we brought in the conversation of aligning to, or I should say, attuning to the frequency of wealth. And this week, we're going to talk about how to attract through the embodiment of receiving. So if you've been with me for a while, you might notice that these words seem familiar. If you've been in any of my courses or communities, there is a 6-step process which I created called Soul Wisdom Imprinting that we're going to go ahead and drop the link for that in the show notes too. It's available for you. It's a self-guided mini course on Soul Wisdom Imprinting. And those 6 steps are awaken, align, attune, attract, amplify, and alchemize. That's the 6-step process to Soul Wisdom Imprinting, which I created, that helps you to basically live your dream life. It's not like this wooey manifestation thing. It seems like it is, but it's really like, how do I align myself every day to what I say I value and what I want to live in my life? And the really cool part is that once you start to do that, you open up this untapped resource that you didn't know that you had, because you have all this extra energy in your health, because you're connected in your relationships. You experience emotional freedom. You're no longer weighted down by all these heavy things. And you tap into this untapped resource of creativity and abundance, which is where the prosperity course and experience take you to. Now, all of this is built through the 5-element wealth, the foundation. So aligning to your physical health energetically is important. We're going to talk about receiving today. In your health, it's about receiving nourishment from the foods that you eat. I want to invite you to listen into a couple of other podcasts where I talk about the energy body. We'll drop those links in the show notes as well. Episode 57, A Journey Through the Chakras. If you're new to me or new to the conversation around the energy body or the chakras, this is one thing that we go through in all of the courses that I teach. And we gain an understanding of the chakras on so many different levels. The shadow work around the chakras, which interestingly enough are very much aligned to the 7 sins. I just always thought that was super interesting. And the reprogramming of the subconscious, like really understanding the different layers of energy bodies that we have. Now, if you're new to this, you're probably thinking like, what the heck is she talking about? Well, join my newsletter, join my tribe. Every once in a while I teach a pop-up class on reprogramming the subconscious in a process that I use called Divine Healing, where I explain and I show, based on science, the different layers of the energy body, the astral, the mental, the emotional, the physical. And it's really empowering because we start to understand, like, this is really an invitation for you to expand your awareness in your mind about, and just be curious about the reality that we're living in. But all of our thoughts, our beliefs, the food we eat, the people we surround ourselves, every single thing is affecting our energetic imprint every single day. And you, if you're in a place where you're expanding, might be breaking some of those karmic genetic patterns. Some of them you're keeping from your ancestors, and you get to choose what you keep and what's no longer serving you based on the time that we're living in. So the energetic imprint gives you insight to what we mean when we talk about the embodiment of receiving, because it's an energy. Another podcast that I'd like to turn you to is episode 63, where we talk about how the energy body affects our ability to nourish. You can eat as healthy as you want, but if your nervous system and your energy body, or if you're ignoring your intuition and you're not creating yourself with healthy relationships, eating healthy alone isn't going to be enough. And if you've heard me talk before, maybe you even heard when I was a guest on the Sovereign Self podcast, I talked about my second health crisis, which was an energetic misalignment because I was eating super healthy, which is how I got to where I am. So check out the Soul Wisdom Imprinting. We talk about the 6 steps. Those 6 steps you can apply to anything that you're working on in life. They're 6 ways to embody and align to the frequency, the energetic frequency of your soul, which I call soul signature. It's basically what you came here to do. So attracting, right? We hear law of attraction, we hear manifestation, and I don't like to get too attached to words and ideas. Instead, what I'd like to do is invite you to ask yourself, like, what does it mean? What would it mean for me to attract what I want in my life? Whether it's a soulmate, financial freedom, being cancer-free, health, love, support. Here's the thing. You might remember last week I shared a journal prompt around the gift I would like to receive would be to allow myself to trust enough to release the doubt that creates hustle and overwhelm. That's just it right there. If you're spinning in circles of indecision, procrastination, people-pleasing, avoidance, right? Like somebody says something and you just immediately make it about them, like they're wrong, you're walking away. If you're the person who does that, if you're never able to follow through on the things that you really want to create for yourself, working out, eating healthy, if you're constantly worried about what everybody else thinks, the people pleaser, and you don't feel good about yourself based on what other people say, if you've given your power to other people to decide who you are, then this is the opportunity to just be really clear about, like, how is this impacting my life and how I feel about where I am right now? And what do I want to do about it? So what I have noticed, and it tends to be the women that I attract in the communities that I support through the courses that I teach, 5-element wealth and prosperity, and the 13 moons of daily devotion, and the retreats that I do, is that most of us are so overwhelmed. Even if if we have to write in our calendar self-care, like if it's not something that we naturally embody and we have to remind ourselves, I mean, that's a good place to start. Like, go for it if that's where you're at. But what if we lived in a place where it was just who we were? Like, every day we didn't have to think about it. We don't have to think about eating healthy. We are healthy, so we eat healthy. We don't have to think about, really results and creating goals, because we embody and align to every day what we say we're going to do because it matters to us. It's the embodiment. It's being the thing, not doing the thing. And receiving is the biggest block that I see, in my opinion, what I have witnessed in women over and over again, and in myself, that I have overcome, is that we think we can do it all on our own. We can't see, we're too busy, and I've told you several times I took that word out of my vocabulary in 2018 because busy just means misaligned. But we believe that we're too busy, our schedule is too full, we lack, these are the words we say, right? We lack time and money to do the things we want for ourselves. But those words are so powerful. What would happen if we shifted those words into positive trust? That's the embodiment of receiving. Prosperity is the embodiment of trust. So, my question for you, you know that I like to invite you to get your pen and paper out. We're going to journal on some of these thoughts so that we can explore the understanding of how our bodies energetically open up or close to receiving. Because receiving is where abundance is. Receiving is where we are resourced. Receiving is where prosperity is. And energetically, it takes trust. It takes trust to open. If we see that we can't make a decision, because decision creates clarity and momentum. If someone says something and it just kind of triggers us and then we avoid rather than being curious about it, if that's a pattern for us, if the thing that we want right now is support and we're saying no to it, then those are like kind of big cues that something's misaligned. The very thing that you're seeking is available for you right now. So the question is, how open am I to receiving? Because there's a whole lot of work to unpack underneath that question. There is so much that comes up around our need to be safe, our need to be seen, our need to be loved, supported, our need to feel worthy. There's a lot to unpack there. And if you haven't done work around that, well, that's what we do inside of our communities. We're not going to unpack all of that today. But just be curious. You probably already felt something. Or maybe this is so new to you that you are struggling to find the saboteur. You're struggling to really know where the block is. Then that's really the invitation to get support, because that's what a person like me, a coach, comes in and calls all your blind spots, because we've done this for years and years and years, and we've seen this, and there's patterns, and there's, we tap into our intuition, and then we create the roadmap for the individual. So get your journal and your pen out. Today we're going to explore some questions that hopefully will allow you to open up and to become more curious, because curiosity is where intuition is, and truth, which is the opposite of our ego and our blocks. So the first question is, when we talk about prosperity is the embodiment of trust, and there's another podcast episode on that. I can't remember the number of it right now, but we will put the link to that podcast episode as Prosperity, the Embodiment of Trust, as a bonus in the show notes. But if we're saying prosperity is the embodiment of trust, because we're talking about trust opens us up to receive, and that is the pathway to manifesting prosperity in physical form, which might look like money or love or health, whatever that thing is. Where do I need to trust more? Is it yourself? Is it in other people? Is it to trust yourself, to trust the right people? It's probably what it more likely is. Is it to trust the healthcare system or your intuition? Intuition is the frequency of trust as well. It's just very clear. It's very simple. It's truth without the ego. So where do I need to trust more in my life? Is it my body, my physical body? I've had 2 health crises. 2006, 2014 took me a long time, and I've supported several women recovering from lifelong illnesses, Lyme disease, cancer, overcoming those things to retrust their body again. So do I trust my body? Do I trust my spouse? Do I trust my coworkers, my relationships? Like, where do you find yourself not trusting in life? Is it systems in general, right? Like the systems that are created for maybe even just tracking your finances. And then the next question is, what is my story around trust? If we're attracting through the embodiment of receiving, we're attracting prosperity, which is the embodiment of trust, and receiving is the gateway. Like if you think of it energetically, for my healers and coaches or people who've been following me for a while, and you know the chakras, just visualize your eyes, really close your eyes and visualize quickly what I'm talking about. We're talking about the sacral chakra. The sacral chakra is where prosperity is, abundance, intimacy, into me, I see, joy, creativity. It's creative life force energy. Life force energy is what generates prosperity. It's so awesome. Life force energy, sacral chakra, creativity, joy, and abundance create prosperity. So sacral chakra, if you don't know what it is, let's, start learning. Tune into some of my podcasts, the episode 57, A Journey Through the Chakras, because this is the chakra, the energy, the gate, the energetic gate in your physical form that connects to the energy of the outside world where receiving happens. I mean, if you think of it physically as a woman, this is where we create life. So it makes sense, right? It's where we give birth and create life. So sacral chakra. What's my story around trust? Where did someone break trust or let me down? And how has that impacted me in relationships? How has it impacted me? Whew. We all have our story of, being let down. But here's the thing. Nobody can reject you, abandon you. Yes, it feels that way. Or be disappointed, or you can't be disappointed in somebody because that's like putting too high of an expectation on somebody, right? When you're disappointed, that's giving your power to that person. Same thing with rejection and abandonment. So and I know this is deep, heavy stuff. And if you have a lot of trauma around this, I hope that you're being supported in this, because this is the root of it. This is where it happens when we're really young. And of course, I'm not a licensed therapist. I just know in the patterns that I see that what we can do to heal around this is really get clear on the impact that it's making in our life right now. And then we can choose, this is where coach comes in, choose to move forward, like on who you want to become. But there's some heavy stories around trust. There's so many things that can happen that, and it might not have anything to do with money. Maybe that's what we're talking about now, but maybe somebody broke your trust in another way. That's my story. How I created this course was giving a person who I thought was a friend, trusting that person more than myself. My intuition was telling me not to do it, and I was ignoring my intuition. I would literally get migraines, and I was invited into a business partnership that ended up failing, and it ended up being a huge loss, and it felt like a huge betrayal. And the thing is underneath the surface, when we feel betrayed by somebody, it's self-betrayal, because I didn't trust myself. I didn't listen to my intuition. There were several signs that were saying, don't step into this. This is not aligned. But I was leading from a place of really desiring a co-creation with another woman that I thought was strong, who I was looking for was me. So where in your life has this shown up? Where have you felt like somebody broke trust, where it was really the invitation for you to trust yourself? Where have you felt betrayed, where maybe you were not listening to yourself? Now, I'm not talking about stuff that happened when we were really, really little. Like, that's the deeper layer of stuff. What we usually notice is that patterns tend to repeat, right? If we're the people pleaser and we attract energy vampires and narcissists who project their emotions onto us, that could be a pattern that shows up. If we lack trust and we can't make decisions because decisions create momentum, because we don't trust ourselves to make the right decision, because we feel guilt or shame, which, remember last week, the map of consciousness, we talked about the energy of emotions. Guilt and shame are the lowest. So we definitely want to rise above those and really get clear on where did this come from, so that we can transmute it. We can transmute it up the scale and move into a higher energetic state and frequency. So what's my story around trust? Where did someone break the trust or let me down? And how is this impacting my relationships? Where is it keeping me from saying no to something that I know is good for me? Because I don't trust myself. How is this showing up in romantic relationships? Intimacy. In the work that I do in the world. My relationship to my coworkers or my boss. With my children. Letting them do what they want to do, which requires a deep amount of trust, especially as they get older. Or maybe even a loved one that's overcoming illness, right? Or when we lose a loved one. Those are moments that require really, really deep trust. And the next question is thinking about my relationship with receiving, because we're stepping into the embodiment of receiving. What is one area I'm willing to lean into and receive more of in life? I started with compliments. Words of affirmation is probably 4th out of 5 on love language. And I realized people would give me compliments and I'd be like, thank you, but I wouldn't feel it. I'd be like, thank you. And it was almost like, well, yeah, I expect better of myself. So I wasn't giving myself permission to be supported by people who were sharing that what they saw in me, which was a compliment. And it was almost like I was responding in a way like, yeah, thanks, but I could do better. So then I was like, never felt like I was enough, which was a lot of what I've worked through. And I know a lot of women that I've supported, the worthiness piece is, it's one of my coaches and mentors, Amber Lillystrom. She was on my podcast. You probably heard her quote at the beginning of this. She says it's a muscle. You just have to keep working it. Many women struggle with worthiness. It's how we get into the overwhelm because we seek external validation. And if we're in overwhelm, we are not in overflow. So if we're in overwhelm, we're not receiving, because there's no reason to be in overwhelm. There's plenty of support. You're just not seeing it or receiving it. But as I shared, mine started with compliments. I started receiving compliments, and I would say, thank you, I'm receiving that. And I would let myself receive it and feel it. I would let myself feel how good it felt to receive the compliment. And it feels really good because it's a way that you get resourced. You can be it's a love language. It's love. Somebody is sending you love, and you can receive it by saying, thank you, I'm receiving that. So think of something that somebody said to you recently and allow yourself to feel what it feels like when somebody says you're beautiful, or you look really nice, or your podcast was amazing. I'm like, thank you, I'm receiving that. I'm like, yeah, thanks. So often we, play small because we're afraid to outshine. But I'm inviting you to let yourself be resourced. So what's one area I'm willing to lean into and receive more of in my life? What's the pattern I notice, or what pattern do you notice? I like to, reframe these journal prompts in like first person, because this is how we get to write. But what's the pattern I notice when I contract and close myself off from receiving? Who do I become, and how does it feel? Oh, yeah, that's a big one. So many times just before we're invited into an expansion, like the thing that you want is right there in front of you. The support that you need is right there. The teacher you're asking for is right there. And we contract right before the expansion happens. I mean, as a coach, I see this all the time. Just before women, well, sometimes they don't, but they choose to step into a co-creation with me, where I'm working with them and supporting them to change their life and what matters to them. They contract. All of the old beliefs come up. I don't have the time, I don't have the money, or they go into indecision, or they go into procrastination, or they avoid, right? Like they cancel the clarity call a couple of times. It's like just before you're supposed to do something, every belief out of fear is going to meet you. And especially when it's really, really meant to be, it's going to feel really hard, because that's how we grow. It's like God or the universe, source, whatever your belief is, wants to know that you're sure you're ready. And so we'll be met. But when you do it enough, you realize that that's just kind of the contraction comes before the expansion. It's kind of like giving birth. And then you don't allow yourself to be trapped in the contraction, because actually the contraction is the expansion. It's how we grow. So what is the pattern I notice when I contract? Do I avoid? Am I the person that unfollows somebody? Am I the person that ghosts people and just doesn't respond? Because I'm, quote, too busy. But I mean, you're only as busy as you say you are. It's just, this could be your unhealthy pattern, right? So what's the pattern I notice when I contract? Do I hustle? Who can relate to this? When you feel contracted and like things aren't going your way, then do you try to overdo? Because you get this false sense of control. And how do you close yourself off from receiving? If you're hustling and grinding and you believe you have to do it all, you're not receiving. If you're avoiding, you're not receiving, because you're all alone. There's no one to receive from, because to be resourced, if you're avoiding, there's a difference between avoiding and solitude. Solitude is like choosing time to be resourced. Very, very different than avoiding because you feel triggered. Very, very different. Solitude is proactive. Avoiding is reactive. So, next question, getting into rewiring that neurological pathway, how is it going to feel when I receive more in my life? What if I were to make that a simple intention for 2023? I'm going to give myself permission to receive more. In our North Star Collective and 5-Element Wealth program, that's a theme many of the women are working through. It's super awesome because they've already created space to receive more support from their loved ones in their life, their spouses, their children. And the beautiful thing is that also tells them that we trust them. Rather than controlling and doing everything, when we give them the opportunity to support us, it just builds a deeper relationship. It's amazing. It's a win-win for everybody. So how's it going to feel when I receive more in my life? Someone gives you a compliment, you receive it, you feel it. And how will I feel when I let go of the pattern where I block receiving and step more into abundance, trust, and flow in my life? In other words, let go of control, step into trust. Prosperity is embodied trust. So you think on the outside this conversation is about money, but it's really about receiving and trust, which helps us with abundance in all areas of life. Money's just the tangible thing. But the beautiful thing is that if your intention, if you're here to heal your relationship with money, especially because we're going through some sort of recession right now. I mean, I say that in that way because that's what people are saying, but I'm not really seeing it in my direct circles. I'm seeing a lot of abundance. And the interesting thing is I think I read an article somewhere, and I don't quote me on this, I don't have the resource for this, but I can remember one of my coaches sharing an article about how millionaires are made during recession because they're not following what everybody else is doing. Because it's really a mindset thing. It's a supply and demand thing, right? Like, I mean, come on. Like, if we look at the big picture, how is there so much influence and control when what really changes, like in the real estate market during COVID, where I live, just went crazy. And now that houses have come back down, well, nothing's changed. Like, we still live in the same place, same resources are available. It's just people decided what it's worth. So every day you get to decide what things are worth. Real estate's such an emotional, interesting thing to witness, and along with the stock market. So really being empowered and taking ownership of your relationship rather than being influenced by your emotions is a great gift to have. So what's the pattern I notice when I contract? How's it going to feel when I receive more in my life? How will it feel when I let go of the old patterns where you step into indecision or people pleasing or overwhelm? You feel exhausted and you start hustling because of scarcity, right? You think you have to hustle, let's just say to create money. What would happen if you stepped into abundance and trust and you took your next step feeling clear and aligned versus, and oh gosh, this was like a theme in my business for so long. Somebody would say, oh, I loved this, you should do this. And I'd be like, okay, I'll do this, the people pleaser in me. And I create something else. Or when I was doing retreats, who wants to come to a retreat? And everybody's like, do a retreat in Bali, do a retreat in Bali. And then you create the retreat and everybody's like, oh, it's too far away. So you know what I learned? Do what works for me. And the people who are supposed to be there will be there. I often do retreats like that. It's like a one-time thing. So you're either there or you're not. You're not. If you really want that experience, then you find a way to make it happen. But I got really clear on alignment rather than doing what I thought everybody wanted and only doing what I wanted, which allowed me to attract people who were on the same wavelength as me. And then lastly, looking back over the last week, what did I learn and how did I grow? Or we could say the last 5 weeks as we step into another week around this prosperity course. So it's really important to reflect and have gratitude for what you're learning. And I would be very surprised if you haven't learned anything, even with each episode that we've gone through. So looking back over the last 5 weeks, what have I learned and how have I grown? And maybe even revisiting your goal from last week, your 3 money goals. What actions am I taking? Who's going to support me? How will it feel? And asking yourself, where am I in that? So, what's your takeaway from today? Hopefully I have left you with at least taking away the importance of the embodiment of receiving, your relationship to receiving, and how that is the foundation for how we attract more of what we want in our life. It's not that it's not there, we just don't trust that it's there, and if we trusted, we would be open and willing to receive. Because being open and willing to receive with healthy discernment, because that's where the clarity comes from, allows prosperity and abundance in our life in many different ways. Come on over to the Passion to Prosperity Facebook group if you're looking to connect with other people who are joining along in this experience. Again, I just want to share that I do have a journal available. The Prosperity Journal will come out in 2023, but right now, if you're looking for something to help you get on track for 2023, 13 Moons of Daily Devotion, where each month is a different theme with daily journal prompts. There's an energy tracker. There is also 13 new moon reflection and ritual ceremonies that we go through, where you have the opportunity to join us each month. There is also the 4 seasons cyclical planning. It's an invitation to help you to create more clarity and alignment and intention in your life every day, while also facilitating gentle healing and awareness. And it's amazing. It's like 5 minutes a day. You just start to redesign your energetic imprint, which is really fun and empowering. And if you miss a few days, it's okay. And yeah, love for you to join. Have a wonderful day. I'll see you again next week, where we talk about the 6th, actually it's the 5th step in the Soul Wisdom Imprinting. Again, we'll drop that link in the show notes as well if you're interested in the Soul Wisdom Imprinting method, which you can use to apply to any area of your life to step into more freedom and abundance and align to your soul purpose. But we're going to step into week 6 next week, which is Amplify Prosperity Consciousness. And Amplify is the 5th step in Soul Wisdom Imprinting. So Amplify Prosperity Consciousness next week. Thank you so much for joining in. I love and appreciate each of you. I've been getting so many nice messages, which I'm receiving, on the value that this prosperity experience has created. So I'm super grateful that you are receiving. Feel free to share and send to your loved ones, because sharing is caring. And the more of us that know this and live this and embody this, the more we get to amplify prosperity consciousness in the world. And the more that people like you listening in are resourced, the more we get to allow that energy, money, to create positive change in the world. We get to amplify our values and our voices, which is the best part, because it's a resource that we get to choose what we do with, which we talk about energetic imprinting. That affects the energetic imprint of the earth in the time that we're living. So we got to think big scale. It's not just about us. It's about the people we love. It's about the generations to come. It's about our earth, our planet, and just the future of humanity. So have a wonderful day, and I will see you all next week. Aloha. You're listening to episode 160, Attract Through the Embodiment of Receiving.
The content of this podcast is to educate, inspire, and inform you of pathways to an embodied healing self. It is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice from your medical doctor, therapist, registered dietitian, or nutritionist for any questions you may have regarding your diagnosis or condition.
Hello, friends, and thank you so much for joining again each week on the Body and Soul Wisdom podcast, formerly the Embodied Healing Self podcast. I am so deeply honored to share this space with you every week. I know that there are many other podcasts that you could be tuning into, and our community is expanding and growing more with each new episode. I'd like to invite you to come on over to jenmons.com/tribe and receive some of the wonderful gifts that we have for you. A meditation bundle, energetic alignment, 5-element wealth, prosperity consciousness. We have a ton of different gifts available for you to enjoy. Now, we have one small favor to ask. In order for this podcast to get into the hearts and souls of like and light-minded people, we need your support. We would love your review and would love it if you'd head on over to jenmons.com/podcast to leave a review or leave one on iTunes so that we can continue to share the love beyond out into the world. Thank you so much again for joining in. We'll see you next week.